All right, Jordan, man. All right, I've already had fun before we even start the show, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Happy to. Yeah.
All right, so here's why I reached out to you. I kind of told you this. We have a mutual acquaintance in Ed Crawford. Great guy. Like we've said before, a guy that's got wicked smarts. And I have watched you primarily through LinkedIn, which I know we're going to get into because that's kind of your wheelhouse, that's your business. But there's a lot of things that have impressed me from afar with you, and that is your entrepreneurial skills. You've obviously got them. The fact that you are creating incredible content, and I could just tell that we're in a lot of ways we're swimming in the same soup. So I am so ready to, without I hate to use the buzz phrases of the time, but we're going to unpack your story.
We're going to double click.
There
We're
we
going to triple click.
There you go. Let's double click, baby. That's one that, yes, I've just now realized. So I try to avoid those. But tell me, man, where does this story start? Because here's what I know about you. You're a recovering banker. God bless you. I know enough about that to know that your recovery is definitely something needed after that stint. You failed business calculus 3 times. I know that about you. But then I also know you've got a heart of gold. You've got a heart for those who have served our country. You're an incredibly prolific entrepreneur. Those are the things I know. So kind of take us back, start the story wherever you want to, and then we'll get after it.
So I'll kind of give my short and boring life story in 2 minutes, and then we can unpackage that as you would like. So I am from San Diego. I grew up in North Carolina, and my father was an airline pilot. I'm a 4th generation pilot. I graduated from UNC Chapel Hill in 2007. I was going for the golf score GPA of the lower the better. I think I had a 2.9, maybe 2.7. I don't know, I'm dyslexic. I did fail business calculus 3 times. I also failed accounting, and I also got a D in accounting in order to pass the class and pass college. And then when I graduated in May 2007, I worked at a software company in Raleigh, North Carolina, dialing for dollars, cold calling accountants. Then I went to Merrill Lynch Private Wealth Management in Raleigh, and I had to bring in $15 million in 12 months, and I was fresh out of puberty, so nobody's going to give $50,000, much less the $15 million that I had to bring in. So in December 2007, I met somebody at a Christmas party, and she taught English in Italy, and I thought that was better than private wealth management, especially since I was hitting every possible wall that I could. And so I actually headed off to Shanghai, and I taught English in China. Did that for 18 months, traveled all around Asia as I was teaching in Shanghai whenever I get vacation. And then I met a guy in a bar who did investment banking in Shanghai. And I thought that was better than teaching English. So I applied for an internship at the firm, and he said, hey, there's a spot in New York, and I think that you should try to get an internship there. So I went through 4 interviews, and they told me no. So I'm in my bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what the heck am I going to do, because I don't have any money. And every month I have to go to Hong Kong to get my visa stamped and come back. So I emailed the managing director of BDA Partners, and I said, Charlie, unless something's changed, you still need somebody in that seat. So I will pay for my plane ticket. I will work for free. And if you don't like me, then kick me out after a month. And so an hour later, he wrote back, said, fine, be on a plane to New York next Monday, and we'll see how this works out. So I slept on my buddy's floor for 3 months in West Village in New York. I did 6 years, 2 months, 8 days of investment banking. And the deals that we were doing were cross-border in nature. So for example, we would get hired to sell a business in Japan, and then each of the other 9 offices will be responsible for contacting local private equity firms, local large corporations that might want to acquire that business. And so I was based in the New York office, and I did a little bit over 6 years of investment banking. And then in February 8th, 2016, the company went through layoffs. They went from 90 bankers to 60 bankers overnight. They shut 2 offices, and my boss came to me. It was basically like, I know you've been trying to start businesses. Like, here's 3 months severance and healthcare. Best of luck with your next thing. I will help invest. I will help support in your next business. And your newborn that is on the way. Like, here's the healthcare. Hopefully, we'll help out with that. So in February 2016, that was really the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. And, I was wandering through the desert of my career, trying to figure out what the heck do I do next, because all I've been doing for 6 years was investment banking with some side hustles and failed side hustles on the side. So I tested out probably 3 or 4 ideas until I met somebody who wanted to start a business, basically a technology platform to connect private equity firms and lenders in order to do debt financing. So think about like eHarmony for debt. So I'll keep on going from there, but actually I'll finish the high level and then we can rewind because there's a lot. Did that for 2 years, raised 175,000 from 3 angels. We brought in $790 million of deals, 55 deals. 1/3 of them got term sheets. 3 of them closed for 140 million. Our general pricing model was to charge a 1/4 point on deals. And then in December 2018, my wife and I decided to shut down Debt Maven because of a number of reasons I can go into, but basically I made every possible mistake that a tech founder can make. A first-time tech founder who didn't raise enough money in a 2-sided marketplace. It was painful. However, half of my 55 deals came for free from LinkedIn. Although I did 6 years of investment banking, I never did a single debt deal. And then I started a company called Debt Maven, connecting lenders and private equity firms. It doesn't make any sense. It's a recurring theme in my life where I just start stuff where I have no reason to start it and no history or credibility. During this time,
like a podcaster that I know, the one talking to. I'm with you, man.
Yeah, we'll figure it out on the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Along that way, though, I co-founded a nonprofit called Elite Meet to help transition Navy SEALs to get jobs. Built that up, did 2,000 volunteer hours. My co-founder and I built the organization up to 1,000 members, did 55 events, and now I'm separated from that, and I focus on a much smaller, same group of veterans, helping special operations veterans, fighter pilots, et cetera, from those communities, helping them get jobs primarily in finance, and that's called 51 Vets. So the story, which I'll kind of end with, is that when that business, Debt Maven, failed, and then we started the next thing, it didn't have a name. My wife just said, if you're not doing Debt Maven, how are you going to pay the bills and help? Because I've been carrying your ass for too many years as a lawyer. So I started to do LinkedIn consulting with private equity firms, investment banks, the people who were in my market as a banker, the people who I reached out to for sales in Debt Maven. And I said, hey, can I do your LinkedIn? I didn't know what the heck to charge. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just, let me do LinkedIn posts and pay me something.
Yeah.
So 2.5 years later, now we have 5 full-time people, and we do any given time 15 to 20 projects at a time, and we're charging anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000 per project. And we specialize in LinkedIn content marketing, video, which will charge $20,000, $25,000 for a video, and then kind of broader digital marketing services. And then personally, to wrap up, my wife and I currently live in New Jersey with our 18-month-old and 4-year-old, and our days are involved heavily with the business, the family. We're both training for our first triathlons. My Ironman is on November 6th in Florida, and I've registered and paid for that, and I can't back out of it. And we do a lot in endurance sports. My wife has signed up for her first triathlon. And on the side, we have investorsandoperators.com, which is like the media side of our business. It's more of a marketing angle for 51 Labs. And then 51 Vets, which is my nonprofit, help transitioning special operations veterans and fighter pilots get jobs. And that's usually around 5 hours a week of time for me.
Wow. So not busy at all. You mean you just kind of take it easy.
It's it's interesting, right? Because it's prioritized.
Yeah.
And it's not, I've had to watch my own self-talk in terms of saying like, I'm too busy, because it's just, I haven't prioritized it. And another thing, which I've learned through endurance sports, so many people put artificial limitations on what they're capable of.
Amen.
So, for example, a couple weeks ago, a senior operating partner at a private equity firm got a job at another private equity firm that I connected him with. That happened when he called me when I was on the indoor bike for 3 hours training for my Ironman. He called me. He's like, "Hey, do you know any firms that I should look at?" And so I knocked out 15 emails when I'm on the indoor bike. And then, a couple months later, it turns out he got a job because of those emails.
Right.
And also, I think it comes through, we can do two things at once. People say you can't do that, but here's an example, like doing the emails when you're on the bike, or I will be out for a run for an hour or two, and I will do business calls while I'm doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we've prioritized and integrated that as part of our life.
Yeah. No,
that was longer than 2 minutes, so I apologize.
Dude, that was absolutely perfect, because there's so much there to dig into. First of all, for the listener who's never been to Shanghai, because I love Shanghai, how would you describe the madness, the beauty, the weirdness, the bun? The bun is gorgeous. How would you describe Shanghai?
New York with more black hair.
There you go. I mean, I try to tell. I'm like, it's. And the weirdest thing for me that when you realize, you can forget you're in a communist country for a while until they turn off the lights in Shanghai around 10 p.m.
Yeah.
It's like, what just happened?
It is in its own world. When you go to other cities, it just feels different.
Yeah.
And I lived there for 18 months, and for the past 10 years, I mean, my in-laws are there. Actually, brings up another story, which is early in the debt maven entrepreneurial journey. We didn't have any money, and we were living in a tiny apartment in Hoboken, and so we sent our 18-month-old baby to go be with the grandparents in China for 4 months.
Oh wow.
And so month one, like I was crying almost every day. I'm like, I'm a crappy father. I was doing investment banking, doing well, making decent money, and now we had to send our kid to be with the grandparents in China. So that was month one. But then month 2, 3, and 4, I'm like, I kind of like this.
Yeah.
My wife and I'm like, wait a second, we have a life now.
Yeah.
But I've been traveling back and forth for 10 years to China, usually once or twice a year.
So let's stop there for a minute, because I think you bring up an incredible point that I love to flush out with entrepreneurs, and here's what I describe entrepreneurship like. There's two ways. One of my mentors who's been on the podcast a couple of times, and an incredibly successful tech entrepreneur, Phil Burks, he always said, entrepreneurs are the only people who will work 90 hours a week to avoid a 40-hour-a-week job. And I think that's one point. And then two, I like to compare, for those listeners out there who are thinking they want to jump off into entrepreneurship. One time I thought it would be a really good idea for me to own a Harley Davidson motorcycle, until a friend of mine borrowed one. I went up to our church parking lot. I drove one loop, turned it over, and realized, it sounded good. I like the idea of it. The reality of it actually was a horrible idea. So talk to the listener about some of the realities of entrepreneurship and why guys like us stick with it and go through that grind, the good, the bad, and the ugly. What's the realities of entrepreneurship?
To start with, the why of entrepreneurship is, there was this I think a former congressman. He was on the Tim Ferriss show. It was like Edward Chow or something, and he had a really interesting way to think about this when he basically said that entrepreneurship isn't about starting companies. Entrepreneurship is an approach to life. And so I only understood my why for entrepreneurship with the sense of concreteness multiple years into my journey. Now I'm 5 years into this. And what I realized is it actually has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with, you know, the esteem of being a CEO of entrepreneurs, because reality is it sucks.
Yeah.
Most months. It's hard work. My why is that I have the freedom to create in the direction and the speed that I want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I want to start a new website that's a private community for professionals in private equity, then I can go test it out right now.
Yeah.
I don't have to go ask my boss. I don't have to go through a long process. I can do that now.
Yeah.
And that creative freedom, which just so happens to be in digital marketing, focused on the mergers and acquisitions market, that creative freedom is my why.
Yeah.
And allows me to express myself in the best way.
Yeah.
There are other secondary reasons why, you know, I'm an entrepreneur. You know, I think Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, you know, he had this Instagram graphic, and it was like, I actually have it on my phone, and it's like, number one, you can't have a boss. Number two, easily bored. Number three, you're too creative. Number four, you're too impatient. You know, criminal streak, not too educated. That's me. You know, you're a lone wolf, et cetera, et cetera. And I just realized, just like, so much of my ship was trying to fit in to somebody else's box.
Yep.
And reality is, I don't fit into a box.
Yep.
I have skills and interests that go across so many different things.
Yep.
And it took me 10 years of my career to finally have that all come together and intersect. And the expression of that, the culmination of that, is precisely what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. Keep going.
And so to the point about the ups and the downs, like I have multiple LinkedIn posts where I share our stories. In fact, I just shared one where I put my W-2 and my wages were like $16,669. And I was like 35 years old. We're 34 years old. And we had just had our kid. And I'm like, what kind of husband am I? What kind of father am I? And I made $17,000 as my W-2. My wife is carrying the family, and she wasn't working at she wasn't at a top tier law firm, you know, bringing in the cash. And so we're struggling together. And then I realized one of the big moments that I realized I was an entrepreneur is when I was in a cafe in the bathroom and crying. And I realized, like, everything, all the failure was coming down on me, and questioning myself. And then I asked myself, how bad do you want to keep on going forward? And I was like, yeah, I want more. And that's when I realized I'm not an entrepreneur, that I'm an actual entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said something that everyone needs to hear. It wasn't about the money. It is about the why that's bigger than any dollar amount you can put on it. You know, whenever I set out to buy my first business, people were like, you're going where, to do what? And they didn't get it. Yeah, they did. And I think and I also had like one time I was telling you, I talked to undergrads a lot, and this girl asked me, you heard of these $100 million exits, you go in, you acquire. And I told her, I said, well, first and foremost, if you're thinking of doing anything with the exit in mind for dollars, I'm not saying you shouldn't have an exit plan or whatever, but if you're thinking that I'm going to go do this thing or build this thing with the hopes of $100 million exit, don't do that thing. that will not be enough to sustain you through what you just talked about, man. Those times, I mean, I remember being up at my office that I could not afford, that I leveraged myself to the hilt for, to buy at 2 o'clock in the morning, laying tile in the bathroom myself with one guy helping me, knowing that my employees, in particular the female employees, would come in and they would really be pissed if all there was a urinal hanging on the wall for them to go to the bathroom. Those times, your moment of, and having those conversations like you had with your wife. I had one with my CPA my first year in business. You talk about posting your W-2. I wish I could go find mine, because I called up my CPA at the end of my first year in business, and I go, hey, I was like, man, Shane, I don't know how this works. I haven't paid anything in because I haven't paid myself this year. And what do I do about taxes? And that's whenever he said, well, you're probably eligible for an earned income tax credit. And I was like, wait, what? No. But it's all these realities. People think, once you do it, once you're the quote proverbial man or the woman in charge, no, you are in charge, but you got to take all the pain that goes with it. So
and I think there's so many more like that. For example, I kept a pretty accurate journal, or a consistent journal, throughout my 5 years in entrepreneurship. And I have a calendar reminder, and it could be something just as simple of just write down one bullet point. Yeah. But I looked back at that journal over the past 5 years, and one of the things that I saw is where I had this consistent entry. Jing, my wife, Jing cried version 1, Jing cried version 5, Jing cried version 10, Jing cried version 13. Wow. And seeing that over 5 years, that was also a consistent reminder about it's about us and the sacrifice that goes into that business and the journey. There was a point in April 2019 when we didn't have enough money to even pay taxes. And I was at a conference in Florida, and my wife texted me saying, you promised to help feed the family this year. You need to deliver. And so one of our prospects was getting off the stage where he was going to speak, and I had my deck ready to go pitch him. And I was just a little bit nervous after you get that text from your wife and partner, and sat down with him, did the pitch. He's like, yeah, cool. Start next week. Come out to Kentucky. And that started a $10,000 a month retainer.
Wow.
And now, like, $10,000 is a small project for us. Yeah. We're now doing $50,000, $100,000 projects. At that point, like, the amount of times that we almost went to zero is uncomfortable to even read in our journal. But one of the most powerful memories is, and when my wife and I talk about in our annual marriage review that we have, we do it's almost like a 10K. We have an annual marriage review.
I've heard somebody on Tim Ferriss's show, they do. I can't remember, you may know that's a recommended deal. I think that's a fantastic idea.
And I was asking her, I know it's been painful. Has it been worth it? And she said that in the last 2 years of your 6 years in banking, I didn't know who you were anymore. It's not that you were bad, it's just that you lost the light that you had. You didn't have that drive. And she said, even though it was bad and painful, seeing you emotionally charged, and even if you didn't know what you were going to do, but that you were alive again and doing this and trying to figure it out, and that you were hungry. She's like, that's the guy I married. And in our marriage and in our entrepreneurial journey, there's only been 2 times when she put her foot down. One was, you have 100 days to get funding. Got it. And the second one, you have 100 days to get a certain amount of revenue. And got it. But one of the other kind of fascinating things I've observed for your entrepreneurship is that when you're in your first year or two, everything's happening. You don't really know how to process what's being thrown at you. But when you're in your third year or of entrepreneurship, et cetera, or your second business, you're probably going to experience the same things, ups and downs, but you just are able to process them in a more objective, stoic way. And it just doesn't affect you as much.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that's one of the things one of my favorite stories is I'm sitting at this, I'm freaking out. I think I'm going broke. It's one of the first deals I ever closed. And this couple is, my first company was a residential real estate brokerage company. I'm sitting with this couple. They're paying cash for this house. They're probably in their 70s at the time. And I didn't know this at the time we were working together. We're sitting down and they tell me the story of like when they first married and they went bankrupt, lost everything. And here they were, happily married, paying cash for a house later in life. And they said, don't worry. You just stick with it. You'll get through it. And I think what you just said is exactly right, man. You learn to deal what once you thought was the world, coming, the sky falling, you now will wake up and go, oh, okay, we can figure this out. We've been here before. And if you can just stick around long enough to fight those battles and survive those wounds, it really does make a difference. So to hear you say that is, man, you have lived, although different industries, there might be some, the plot is the same, brother. That hero's journey. It's
and maybe I just want to live the hero's journey, which necessitates the really bad.
I had a counselor once tell me I've got a hero complex. I absolutely. And let's talk about that a minute, because the call I had before you and I got on, my buddy asked me, he said, why do we do this? Like this content creation and the thing where for me, this is something I'm trying again. I've been at it for a while and I'm really enjoying this entrepreneurial venture, and he's like, why do we do it? And I said, well, if you've studied anything about flow and growth mindset and feedback loops, you realize because we're looking for that dopamine hit, and you can't have the dopamine hit that we love without that resistance that you fight through to get there. I think that's a lot of it. And one of the things that I've picked up on through your just the little bit we've spoken, Jordan, is that you're obviously implementing some tools that I did not early on. I mean, now, names like Gary Vaynerchuk, Tim Ferriss, Stephen Kotler, fill in the blank, they're all commonplace. Now, granted, guys like you and I will show up to the cog in the wheel guy and they'll be like, who is that? Why? What's flow? But for the space we occupy, you seem to have grabbed onto that really early. Tell me what you have done in the way of self-education, which I think is enormously important for an entrepreneur. What have you done? And let's go back to those priorities. How do you prioritize those top line items to kind of work your way through? And then what's the cadence of that look like?
So in terms of self-education, my Audible is a library of books that are 1/3 finished, and I bounce back and forth. And I used to think like, you're never going to finish any of them. But then I realized in looking at my journal, which I do, every other day, some days I'll go deep, some days I'll just put, a couple words. But I think one of the key factors to living a successful entrepreneurial life, and I mean that from a fulfillment perspective, not monetary, is the ability to consistently reflect. And it doesn't have to be 15 chapters. It can be 4 words. And then the ability to look at books and other people's thoughts, integrate that into your own life and reflect on it has been really powerful. So, we spend, I think, so much time consuming other content in rapid fire without getting deeper into the content. And there have been a few books that have really impacted the way that I think and approach life. Some of those books being Deep Work, and how to really survive in a distracted world. Recently, Essentialism. Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek is the reason why I went to China. His book Tools for Titans, I marked that up a ton, and I reflected a lot on the thoughts. A book that has been helpful for every entrepreneur. Like, if you are an entrepreneur, then you need to get a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. And the entrepreneurial operating system that he lays out, it helps bring order to chaos. And a lot of times for inexperienced entrepreneurs, which I still am, 5 years into this, It helps bring structure.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting because when you think about a state of flow, in the sense of Mikhail Szymanski or whatever his name is, I forget. I think he's a University of Pennsylvania professor, maybe. The guy really kind of created and popularized the state of flow. Or was it Tal Ben-Shahar? No, he wrote Happier. Mikhail Szymanski, he was the positive psychology state of flow guy.
He's the one who really started the Dawson Church and Kotler and all them kind of looked to as the godfather, if you will, of the whole flow thing.
Yeah, I can point to my 8 years in jiu-jitsu as being like really the only time that I've experienced consistent flow, because when you do that 60 or 90-minute session that I do 4 to 6 days a week, you tend not to think about other things when somebody's trying to choke you out. And so I did enter a state of flow when I lost track of time, and that, I had enough data points to say, hey, over 8 years and 29 gyms and 5-6 days a week, like, this is my meditation, this is my flow. In entrepreneurship, and in our business with 51 Labs, I think that when it's like 10 o'clock at night and I'm writing a LinkedIn post that I know is going to be important, like we just did one for a client, a hedge fund client, and they got 70,000 views and 1,500 likes on one post. And when I'm writing that, I'm just in my flow state. Like, I'm not thinking about, because I'm so into the story.
Yep.
To create a 1,500 character post.
Right.
But that's how I experience flow.
Yeah.
That's one way that I do.
Yeah.
Sorry, I lost track of the other question.
Well, it was just that, the kind of just the self-education and how you're setting those priorities, because you are keeping so many things. I mean, I love the fact this, again, I knew the conversation would go this way. I mean, we have so many of the similar interests. I like to talk to people that are, it's kind of like the law of attraction or whatever. But with your health routine, I mean, you're doing jiu-jitsu, you're doing ultra marathons, you're training for Ironman, and you're fitting that into a very hectic entrepreneurial life. How are you prioritizing? And by the way, you're a family guy.
Yeah, so I'll walk you through my typical day.
Yeah, go.
So, my typical day starts at around 5:45 when I can hear the kid crying in the other room. Yep. Get some milk, give it to him, put him in bed, and I go back to sleep for about 30 minutes. So I'm usually up 6:30, 6:45, and then every Monday through Friday, 7:30, we walk 10 minutes to the pier, and we do a 20 or 30-minute HIIT routine with my 4-year-old, my 18-month-old, and we have a couple friends in our group that I lead.
Love it.
So it starts off every single weekday with exercise with my kids. And I'll come back to the compounding effect of that and how that's influenced in the past year, especially during COVID. So come back to the apartment, 8:15, get the kids, drop them off at daycare, 8:30. 8:30, 9 o'clock, going back to the apartment, showering up, getting ready for our 9 a.m. stand-up. And then from 9 a.m. until 11 or 12, I usually block that time off for deep work. And I just want to accomplish one big thing in that morning.
Yeah.
And I'll have some of the flash tasks that need to get done quickly, but to me, success is defined by the morning, or one of the parts of the daily success is to get that one thing done in the morning when my energy is high. And it goes back to this book, Effortless, when instead of having a to-do list, have like an end of day list. Because as an entrepreneur, your to-do list will never end.
Right.
It's an infinite list.
Yeah.
So the morning is usually deep work time. When I try to block off, I'll turn off Slack, I'll turn off email, and I'll turn off LinkedIn, et cetera. I'll just need to get big work done. And then in the afternoon, I'll have client calls, pitches. And then 5:15, go off and get the kids, come back, shower, bed, everything. They're usually down 7:30, 8 o'clock. And then from 8:30 or 9, then I have Ironman training. So I'm either doing, 30 to 60 minutes of swimming, or I'm doing an hour-long bike. Tonight I have a speed test for my running. And then I come home and Jing and I sit at the table and we're doing more work. We're talking about a narrative for a portfolio company overview that we're going to charge $20,000 for.
Yeah.
And so that's usually Monday through Friday. Every Wednesday, I spend an hour or two with transitioning veterans to do a fireside chat, and that's weekly. And so my goal this year is to do 51 fireside chats this year. I've spent 2,000 hours over the past 4 years helping transitioning veterans. It is part of my life, come hell or high water. Like this is where I can have a meaningful impact. And it has brought a lot of balance, especially in the past year, brought a lot of perspective of what is important, what is important. And one of the things I noticed, and for the entrepreneurs who might be going through the valley of suck right now, ask yourself, what are you doing for somebody else? Because when you focus on giving on a regular basis, even if you are busy with your business, when you focus on others, it helps bring your perspective and it makes you ask, is this really that difficult compared to the transitioning veteran who has 4 kids and they're trying to find their job?
Yeah.
So that's usually Monday through Friday. And then on Friday, actually in the morning, I have a private community for partners in private equity, and we meet every single Friday. Imagine like a mastermind, but with people who run billion-dollar private equity firms. Small group, 10, 15 people. Saturday and Sunday is when I do my long sessions for Ironman training, where I will do like this past weekend, did 3 hours on the bike on Saturday. And then on Sunday, I'll put the kids in the jogger and we'll go run for 2 to 4 hours. It will go run from Jersey City to Hoboken, go run 90 minutes, get some coffee, cafe, etc. Then we'll run back. And that's usually the week. So to kind of summarize, it's the business, 51 Labs. It is being with the kids in the morning and the evening. And then it's Ironman training it's every day. And then on the weekends, it's a lot more Ironman training and a lot more business, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And it's not because we have to, it's because we love it.
Yeah.
It's part of our identity. Like my wife and I were in the kitchen, 9 o'clock at night doing dishes or whatever. We're talking about the business.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And now I want you to tell the listener, because I did not know this until you and I were talking before we got on, about why 51 Labs.
Yeah, it started off as 5149 Labs, and that came from Gary Vaynerchuk. He had a video and just this idea of always give more than you receive.
Yep.
And that's where the 5149 comes from. And so what I've discovered after I just thought it'd be cool to put his idea on our business, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Let's do this. But I realized, a year into it, what it actually means is not just giving more than you receive, but it's actually taking the medium and long-term view of a relationship. So if I'm doing a transaction with you, that's a short-term view of a relationship. But if you're a private equity firm and I just brought you an operating partner, I could make 10, 20, 30% off that person's first year salary.
Yeah.
But I start with just trying to do the right thing. The amount of free stuff that we've done in the past 2 years of doing this business is ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had one of my friends who, runs a large firm, and he said he texted me 5 times, quit giving your shit away for free. And it is painful. But the thing that you can't replace is your reputation.
Right.
The thing you can't be short-sighted on is your relationships in the market. Yeah. That's the most difficult thing to build and maintain.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And another thing too, that you're talking about Gary Vaynerchuk, who both of us, I guess, for me has always been kind of a virtual mentor since since he came onto my radar, just watching him, his understanding of his gratitude for what this country has offered him and his work ethic combined with the opportunity exists is just nothing short of remarkable. But one of the things that I like most about your story in particular, and this is something that it advised this audience on, okay, you took and you were able to monetize LinkedIn. There's so many ideas, there's so many monetizable ventures sitting out there that most people are not paying attention to. So just, if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm sitting here and I'm like, Jordan, mentor me, guide me, how did you figure that out? What could people be doing to try to figure out ways to look for an income stream in places that they may not even know exist?
Yeah. So one of the key business lessons and key entrepreneurial lessons that I've learned is that the way that you find a business is through a lot of experimentation. People don't want to hear that. People don't want to hear that you have to go down a path that you don't know where it's leading to. And entrepreneurship is this bouncing path. One quick videos.
So, which, by the way, I need to pick your brain about that. So usually my wife and I are in New York at least 3 or 4 times a year, and we have not been able to go with COVID and all that. So I want to talk to you about, we can do that offline. That the listeners probably won't care about that, but I definitely need to hit you up to figure out. We're ready to get back. We love New York. We have our own bench in Central Park. As a matter of fact, I told her, I said, would anyone notice if we ever took the commemorative plate off and put our name over it?
Nobody will.
So yeah,
nobody will.
I'm ready to go back.
So I think that the critical lesson for entrepreneurs here is not what is your business going to be, because that's a secondary thing. The first thing you have to learn and ask yourself is, why do you want to do this? And it's okay that you don't have a concrete reason why, because you discover that as you go through your journey. As you go into month 1 and you realize, I can build whatever I want. I can structure my day however I want. I can go this way, not that way. Yeah. I can decide to not take on investors and just run a business that does $10,000 a month. Yeah. Fantastic. That's what I did with Debt Maven in this business. I'm like, why do I need to raise millions of dollars for Debt Maven when I can just do a business now where we're doing, $50,000 to $100,000 a month with a 5-person team, and we live a really, really good life. Yeah. And now we want to scale it to 10 people, then 15, but maybe we get to 25 people. Like that's fine. I don't want to be VaynerMedia 700 people. Maybe that's not what we want.
Right.
So the entrepreneurs or the people who think that they want to go down this route, and you feel that something's just not right in your career, you need to start testing. It is okay that you will not know exactly how it's going to play out. I got to a digital marketing business that focuses on the mergers and acquisitions community, doing LinkedIn content and video production with 0 agency experience, with 0 marketing experience, with 0 video experience, by testing. Yeah. I got here by watching Gary Vaynerchuk's videos years ago, and then I applied his lessons to my Debt Maven business. That's how we sourced half of our $790 million of deals. Yeah. That business failed, but it showed me there's an opportunity here to go maybe sell some LinkedIn services. Yeah. I did not know how to sell my services. I didn't know how to price it. I listened to a Gary Vaynerchuk episode when he told a New York-based small agency that focuses on car dealerships, what should you charge? $5,000 for strategy, $5,000 a month of retainer, and then see where it goes. That is exactly how I paid for that's exactly how I charged and priced my very first client. $10,000 a month. Does it work? Private equity firm that has $500 million, it said, yeah, cool, start next week. Yeah. So the entrepreneurs need to know, it doesn't matter if you don't have a business. It's going to change. It's going to evolve. That's fine. Yeah. You need to ask yourself, are you an entrepreneur or are you a wantrepreneur? Because the wantrepreneur is going to be talking about this for weeks, for months, for years. I had my the co-founder of my first business, it was his idea. He actually had the business plan 2 years before. He did nothing for 2 years. He had a 25-page business plan. He talked about it with some people for sure. He came up with the name. He actually knew debt. He actually had done billions of dollars debt deals, but he wasn't willing to quit his job, making 500,000 plus. And that's when I realized, like, it's hard to start a business and leave. And that's when you realize, as an example, are you an entrepreneur or are you an entrepreneur? It's not a judgment at all, because the entrepreneurial life is tough.
Yeah. I love that. And you know what? One of the things that you just reminded me of is one of my favorite quotes. I think it was, I think I first heard it from Richard Koch in his 80-20 book, or just one of his talks, is that, the two most addictive things in the world are a paycheck every 2 weeks and cocaine. And the first one will kill you, and it's true. And in your former partner or co-founder, or would have been, it's so hard to walk away from that false security of, and you talk about Gary Vaynerchuk, man, how many people do you think, of the millions of listeners to the Gary V audio experience, or his followers on Instagram or whatever, how many millions of people listen to him every day or day in, day out for years, and yet have never done a thing, have never taken that one step? It just blows my
I would say
mind.
that a significant majority do, because when they live vicariously through his life, they are able to satisfy their need to feel that journey.
Yeah.
And so that's why he says all the time, stop listening to me, go off and do it.
Go execute.
And so they use it as an excuse to do work. And I had the same thing when I was in the first year or two. I would, watch a whole bunch of videos, try to get the inspiration, but at the end of the day, you just have to turn it off and do the work.
Yeah.
And the work in the beginning, especially when you don't have a concrete idea, it's unclear. And so you want to do things that are clear. You want to do things that are structured. You want to do things that are going to give you that dopamine hit.
Yep.
And I had to tell myself, are you going to be a professional, or are you going to be an amateur? Because the amateur is going to do what feels good.
Yeah.
The professional is going to get the work done.
Yeah. Now I want to give you a minute here to really showcase why your business is important. And because I get it, I understand the value of LinkedIn. I probably didn't for a long time. And I actually have one of my advisory clients that did not even have a LinkedIn personal nor business page. I created it for him, sitting in his office one day. I said, you've got to, because he was looking to hire. He's trying to scale the business. I'm trying to help him roadmap that. Like, well, first of all, the fact that you don't have the job posting out on LinkedIn and you don't have a LinkedIn is just, mind boggling. And you advised me early on. So I'm no expert, but tell the listener out there that is not fully leveraging the value of LinkedIn, what they should be doing and how you have implemented this strategy. And hey, I'd love for you to source some business to this podcast, man. That would thrill me to death. I mean, in exchange for you blessing your time. Talk to us about the value there.
So if you are a entrepreneur or in sales, whatever, if you're generally in the B2B business, then your client base is on LinkedIn. Or if you're finding a job and you want to find that next thing, like, your employers are on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is never going to be as good as it is now. And this is not my idea. I got this from Gary Vaynerchuk. He says all the time, LinkedIn today is like Facebook in 2012, Instagram, et cetera. All the other platforms go through the exact same evolution. When the content that I do on LinkedIn today, that'll get 10,000 views. If I do the exact same content with the exact same powerful story, it'll get 100 views on a good day on Instagram or Facebook. So it's never going to be this good again. So we need to get that first on the table. Businesses producing content once or twice a week on LinkedIn about the business, not through the company page, but through their personal page, it allows you to be memorable. And for example, if we use the clients in our market, there are tons of private equity firms that focus on industrials, that focus on healthcare, that focus on business services. So the investment bankers who are hired to sell businesses, or the sellers who are being courted by these private equity firms, when they see a story, when they see the content on LinkedIn, or the videos that we do either on LinkedIn or on their website, et cetera, that content allows you to develop a human connection. And that's one of the biggest things that has been missing from the private equity market, the mergers and acquisitions market, which is the broader community that we serve, is that we have the 45-year-old white dude problem. And it's not that if you're 45 years old and white, that's bad. It means, I'm using this as an example of, there's no story to who you are as an individual.
Yep.
Whether you're a woman, a person of color, 45-year-old white dude, it doesn't matter. What people want is to know who you really are.
Yeah.
Because especially in the past year, having gone through this pandemic, people need to feel connected. And people connect with stories.
Yep.
So by doing this in LinkedIn content and posts, the way that you can start, and this is what I'd recommend anyone who wants to know, how do you get started on LinkedIn? Here it is. Find one story from your background and just tell it. It doesn't have to be special. So, for example, I failed business calculus 3 times. I failed accounting. I got a 2.79 GPA in college, and then I went to investment banking. This doesn't make sense. But I wouldn't give up, even after I was turned down after 4 years. And then I got into entrepreneurship. That's just tell your story. It doesn't have to be pretty. It has to be real. So the one thing you need to do is this week or next week, write one LinkedIn post. Do it at 9 a.m. posting Wednesday through Friday, and tell a real, authentic story about you. Don't worry about your business. Don't worry about your product unless it's about your story. That's where you start. And then we can go into some of the top mistakes on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
but I'll come, we can either come back to that or go deeper.
Oh, I think that's a perfect place to go, because I would imagine, one, I'm probably making them, so I'm selfish, and two, I guarantee I'm not unique in that regard. So what are some of those big mistakes?
So here are some of the top mistakes on LinkedIn. Include, first and foremost, boring content that doesn't add value to the audience.
Yeah.
So if it feels corporate, if it feels inauthentic, that doesn't work. Mistake number 1. Next mistake, sharing is not caring on LinkedIn. So if somebody has a post, somebody has an article, you sharing that like from your company page to your page, it doesn't do anything. Not on LinkedIn. Next, hashtags, just keep it to 2 or 3 hashtags that are relevant. If you do hashtag private equity, hashtag investment banking, that's relevant to my market. And weeks and weeks and weeks of producing content that makes you relevant. Next mistake, tagging too many people. So for example, if I tag hashtag Bill Gates, hashtag Damon John, hashtag Gary Vaynerchuk, et cetera in this post, the people gave me inspiration. Unless the tagged people engage with your content, it's not going to do anything. In fact, the algorithm will penalize you because it's going to kind of view it as spam. So be selective with the tagging and make sure that the people and companies you tag actually engage.
Okay.
Some of the other mistakes are the way that it is structured. So you have to think like you read. We don't want to read in paragraphs. We want to read in short, snappy sentences. That's how LinkedIn works on posting today. There are tons of other mistakes that are common, but start there. But
Okay.
the most important thing, which goes to the overall discussion we're having, just about entrepreneurship, stop talking about it. Like, do it.
Yeah.
Because you're going to iterate. You're going to get better.
I love that. And, I will see one of the things I've seen more of is like, and I feel bad for them. It's like some of my friends that are looking for jobs. They post, willing to work or whatever it is. And they don't do that. They don't tell who they are. And it's just like, so you and a lot of other people are looking for a job. So I think that's all incredible advice.
If you are looking for a job, and let's say it's in enterprise sales or whatever it is, find a way to create a story.
Yeah.
Like, why are you good at sales?
Yeah.
Hey, when I was young and I wanted to buy my first pair of shoes, and my parents said, yeah, you're going to pay for it, so go figure it out. Oh, so I mowed lawns.
Right.
Nobody wanted me to do it. Then I told them, like, hey, can I mow your lawn for free? And then I learned, like, oh, there's this tactic in sales, like, give something away for free. They feel like you owe you something, and then at least get you in the door to have a conversation where maybe you could get a sale.
Yeah. I love that. So let me ask you this. So with regard to approaching people on LinkedIn, because I know that, first of all, when someone tries to sell me something through LinkedIn, even if it's LinkedIn, that has no impact on me. In fact, it kind of pisses me off. So if, let's say I just finished, let's say that you're just finished your newly minted MBA from SMU, and you want to go to private equity, and you don't want to be in Dallas, you want to go to New York, and you're going through and you're looking at Goldman and KKR and Carlyle, and you see somebody that you may have you have that one connection in common. How do I approach someone in a cold or warm way on LinkedIn that's going to be most effective to yield a response back?
Yeah. So one thing, and I'll get to your question, one overarching principle is, instead of doing a whole bunch of cold outreach, find the few super connectors who you already know and go deeper into those relationships. And this is the same advice that I give transitioning veterans. So it applies to anyone who's trying to either find a job, sell, whatever. Identify the people who care about you, like genuinely, who are willing to spend time, and spend an hour. I'd much rather spend an hour with them and getting honest feedback about the direction in your career, and having them say, hey, I know somebody in New York, like, they might or might not be in commercial real estate, but I'll just talk with them. That chain is much more efficient to go down. However, if you might not have that network at all, then the way that you should do cold outreach or warm outreach on LinkedIn is, one, adding value to them first. Jason, I saw your story. I'd really like to have you on my podcast for 30 minutes to ask you about X, Y, and Z.
Right.
It makes them feel valued, which is a fundamental principle. Every human being wants to feel heard. Every human being wants to feel valued. And you've done that. There are other ways that you could still tap into that fundamental need. Jason, I just graduated from SMU. You're a VP at this firm. Don't go after the partners first.
Right.
Go after the VPs or below, and say, honestly, I feel like I'm hitting a wall, and I could use some candid feedback. I used to say, like, just no BS feedback on my resume.
Yeah.
And as long as you're coming off genuine, which is the other kind of second big principle here, if you're coming across genuine, most people are going to reach out.
Yeah.
And another thing is, don't give up. If they connect with you, unless they remove your connection or block you, just be persistent in a professional way.
Yeah.
So come across, in terms of stylistically, do not write long paragraphs.
Yeah.
For example, one of the things that we would do for the nonprofit is, Jason, transitioning Navy SEALs have trouble finding quality jobs. Can you be a guest on our firesides that we host weekly?
Like that.
There's so much more detail and nuance to it. We help Green Berets, we help fighter pilots, we help pararescue jumpers, etc.
Yeah.
The message is clear. It's a yes or no. I'm interested. I think it's kind of cool, or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here's another thing. Here's an idea that job seekers can apply right now. Let's say that you want to get a job in enterprise sales for Salesforce or whatever. Start a podcast, go to Squarespace. It is not that hard. You literally have to press record on Zoom, and you don't even have to do post-production. Like, just get it, upload to your YouTube and say, hey, Jason, I just started a YouTube series on how to be a quality enterprise salesperson.
Right.
And my goal is to do 10 informational interviews, 30 minutes every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern for the next 10 Wednesdays. Will you be my first guest? I don't know what I'm doing, Jason. Can you please, like, I just want to get into this. I honestly don't know what I'm doing.
Oh, that's genius.
Start there.
Love it.
And then what happens, this is really interesting also from a job seeking perspective. Imagine if you're an employer and someone comes to you and says, so you want to be in enterprise sales, right? Like, prove that to me. Well, hey, Jason, like 2 months ago, I started this, silly little YouTube series. It got 10 views each one, and I read a little article about it. But then what does the employer think? You actually care about learning about. I see that you knew nothing, and then you were proactive to learn something.
Right.
And you just kept on trying to learn. Now I have 10 data points that are quality data points that prove to me you actually want to do this job.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if your content sucks. It doesn't matter if your posts suck. It doesn't matter if your article sucks. It doesn't matter. Just show and demonstrate that you're actually interested in an authentic way.
Yeah. I think that's genius. And I love that because I've got 2 daughters about to finish school. I've got one that's a senior at Alabama, and one that's got 2 years left at Colorado. And I'm telling them, you have got to leverage what you know and go a little bit further. And I think what you just said is remarkable, because most people out there listening, again, and that's why I wanted to get you on that topic. Most people just look at LinkedIn as this static thing that maybe I'll put out as kind of my living resume. And they don't understand the tools that are there to use in a creative way to do things that most people won't. I think that's beautiful, man. Well said.
Well, it's been a lot of trial and error over the past 5 years on it.
Well, that's how you learn. But all right. And before I let you go, I do want to talk about this, because you've mentioned it a couple times, that I think that most people, when they hear Navy SEAL, or they just think, and I learned this whenever I was at Home Depot, Bob Nardelli, who was the CEO at the time, he brought in a lot of JMOs. And that was one of the things he was.
Can you hold on 1 second?
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Absolutely. But talk about some of the challenges that those guys face from going from the service to civilian life, and how you guys are helping. And by all means, man, take this as an opportunity to reach out to this audience to support those efforts, because I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah. So for a little bit of background, I am not a veteran. I don't really have a lot of military connections. I mean, a few. My grandfather was Lieutenant Colonel in the Marine Corps, but it hasn't been a big part of our life. But then in 2017, I read a book by Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership. So then I went on LinkedIn and I typed in Navy SEAL, and then I just started connecting, be like, hey, what are you doing after you get out? And I didn't know anything. I was just, starstruck by just the SEAL brand, the book. I was really influenced. Everything Jocko said was the gospel. So reached out to someone who did connect. He and I became co-founders of the first nonprofit, Elite Meat. And so we grew that over 3 years to 1,000+ members, 55 events, 200 guys got jobs, raised over a couple $1 million in funding. But I think that the transitioning veterans that I work with, who are 10 to 20 years of service, who come from special operations community, whether it is a Army Green Beret, Army Ranger, Air Force Pararescue, Navy SEAL, Navy, SWIC, whatever that is, or from the fighter pilot community, and some from the intel community. The difficulty is, how do you successfully translate your 10 to 20 years of highly specialized military training and service to the business world in a lateral move, as opposed to, hey, great job as a Navy SEAL for 20 years. Do you want to be an analyst at an investment bank making $75K?
Right.
How do we not just get first them to be able to effectively translate that experience, because they don't typically want to go do contracting, to go, sit in the sand for another 3 to 6 months, getting paid very well, but that's not what they want to do in life next.
Right.
And so, for example, one of the members in our Group 51 vets is doing very, very, very well now as a former fighter pilot, and now he's sitting in a simulator. He's like, I hate this. Like, yes, I'm doing really well, but this is not what I'm gonna be doing with my life and my brain and my bandwidth. So how do we get not only him to be able to translate his experience, but then also the employer to understand what that experience means and be able to connect the dots to, oh, you'd be really good as a VP of operations. Like, I understand that you don't have 10 years of operations experience in something directly in our industry, you don't have your MBA, but you actually understand how to move. You understand how to get things done and how to operate a team, whether it's 5 people, 25, 50, 500. So the number one thing has been that translation issue and bridging that gap.
Wow. Well, and it's very, very noble work, and I'm glad you're doing it. And I want you to just again, where can people find out more about what you're doing with the nonprofits, as well as, where do people find you? Tell them where to go.
Yeah, they should go to my LinkedIn. Just type in Jordan Selleck. That's Selleck into Google, LinkedIn. It'll come up. Jordan Selleck, if you want to reach out to talk about how to help transitioning veterans from the special ops community or fighter pilot community. If you want to just get some ideas for your LinkedIn, whatever, it doesn't matter. Just reach out, and I'm pretty responsive on that. Unfortunately, 24/7, 7 days a week. Actually, what I did is I deleted social media from my phone for certain times of the day or the weekends.
Smart.
And because I needed to control the time in my life and just get more intentional. But please reach out, Jordan Selleck, or my email is jordan@5149labs.com. That's 5149labs.com.
Well, fantastic. Well, Jordan, dude, we just chewed through an hour and 10 minutes like it was nothing, and that doesn't even count the great conversation and the quick consultation you gave me about LinkedIn before we got on. And I want to tell you, I am so thankful for you responding to my LinkedIn message. And brother, if I can ever repay the favor in any way, I'm at your disposal. I want to reciprocate. And thanks, man. This has been a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for the time. I appreciate it.